Nice picture.
Yeah.
Welcome, everybody, on behalf of Holocaust Museum LA. My name is Michael Morgenstern, and I am pleased to welcome you to our discussion with Angelina Billowa, a Holocaust survivor from Germany. Before we begin, I would like to share a few words about the museum. Holocaust Museum LA is the first Holocaust survivor-founded Holocaust museum in the United States. In the 1960s, a group of survivors worked together to create a memorial for their loved ones who perished in the Holocaust, and this memorial eventually became Holocaust Museum LA. These survivors did this at a time when the community was by and large not ready to hear about the Holocaust. Thanks to their courage and their foresight, these survivors established a museum with a mission to commemorate, educate, and inspire future generations. Furthermore, they mandated that our museum should always be free to the public, making Holocaust education accessible to everyone. Even though we are not able to be in the museum's physical space for the time being, we are still able to carry forward their mission. This morning, you have the honor and privilege of listening to Angelina Billowa, who will share her story with you. Afterwards, you'll be able to ask her questions. Those watching on Zoom can use the Q&A box, and those on Facebook can type your questions in the comments, and Angelina will answer as many questions as possible. Angelina has been one of our regular speakers for quite a few years now, and we're so honored to have you here this morning to share your story with us. Thank you so much for being with us.
You're welcome. What happened now?
Yeah, you may begin now.
You can start.
Oh, okay. Hello to everybody. My name is Angelina Billowa. I'm a Holocaust survivor. I was born in Berlin, Germany in 1927. My parents were handicapped. They couldn't speak and they couldn't hear. They had 3 children. I was the youngest. So I was lucky that my older sister and brother would teach me sign language. We lived in an apartment house. We were the only Jews, but we didn't have any problems until 1933, when Hitler came to power. He made no bones that his plan was to get rid of the Jews. So he started early with all kinds of laws against us. He pictured Jews with dark hair, big noses. Now, my family, we happen to be blonde and blue-eyed. So we could get away with things that people that were dark couldn't. In 1933, when he came to power, I was ready to go to school. I was the only Jewish girl in the class. I went to a public school. I had to sit in the back of the room. And after 2 years, I was thrown out altogether. And I was sent to a Jewish girls' school, which was a 45-minute walk. We still could use public transportation. That came a little later. I went to the Jewish school. My mother would walk with me. Across from our school was a regular public school. Those kids used to call us names, insult us, In the winter, they would cover rocks with snow and throw it at us. But, you know, we got used to that too. Things became harder all the time because they always came up with things like every Jewish girl or woman would have to have the name Sarah. Every man had to have the name Israel. We did get a card that we had to carry with us all the time, an ID with a big J in front of it. Things became more difficult. No, then we couldn't use public transportation. We couldn't go in the park. We couldn't go to the movies. But, you know, we all got used to that. The worst came on November 9th, 1938. First of all, they arrested Jewish men and put them in concentration camps. My brother, who was 18 by then, committed suicide because he saw no future for himself. My sister, who was 6 years older than me, had to work forced labor for Siemens. Now, November 9th, I walked to school. I had to pass a Jewish neighborhood with Jewish stores. In front of the stores were the German yellow shirts or brown shirts, and they screamed, "Don't buy from Jews." They destroyed the stores, they threw out the merchandise. I passed through that, went to school, but of course we were sent home immediately. Things became worse all the time. In 1939, they closed all Jewish schools. I had to work in a children's home for a while, but that also was then forbidden. Things became worse and worse. In 1939, they made us wear the yellow star. That, of course, limited us to go anywhere. In 1940, they started deportation. They came with big moving vans and took whole families away. The rumor started that they were all sent to Poland, and we found out later that they were all killed. Deportation started in 1942. It was our turn, September 1942. Two Gestapo men came to our apartment in the middle of the night, told us to take a few things and come with them. They took us by public transportation to one of the biggest synagogues in Berlin. The outside was okay, only the inside was destroyed. When we entered the synagogue, we saw people sitting on their luggage, all kinds of people, old people, young people, small children, babies. And we saw the SS men and women sitting on the stage. As we walked in, they called my sister and me and asked us, maybe you're not 100% Jewish, maybe you have a relative that's not Jewish, but we said, no, we are 100% Jewish. They sent us into the audience. We were all sitting there, 1,000 people, for 3 days. didn't get anything to eat or to drink. After 3 days, they took 1,000 people marching through the city of Berlin to a railway station. On the way, the Germans were standing in the streets clapping, "Oh, Hitler promised, and we finally getting rid of the Jews." We were put on a train. Only the German SS men and women. And the train left. We had no idea where we are going. I was 15 years old. And we came to a certain point where the grown-ups said, "Oh, it looks like we are not going to Poland." So everybody thought, "Oh, maybe that's good." The train continued, only stopped for the Germans to get food or water. We never got anything. The train stopped in Riga, which is the capital of Latvia. We knew that there was a ghetto. We thought, no, we haven't heard anything bad. Maybe it's not so bad. The train stopped. They took out 10 men, shot them right on the spot, and the train continued. We had no idea where we're going. On October 1st, the train stopped in Estonia. We were chased off the train, told to stand in line. They had were the SS men and women, and they would decide, you go right, you go left. So when it comes to us, they told my sister and me and others to go to one side, about 200, and the rest, the 800, the other side. Now, we knew that our parents don't understand what's going on, and we saw that they put them on the bus. So we ran to the bus, and we were sitting on the bus with them. But the SS followed, started screaming at us, that they told us to clean the station. So we said, no, we have to be with our parents. And they said, oh, don't worry, you'll meet them. But we never met them again. The 1,000 people, they selected 200, and the rest, 800, were killed immediately. We had to clean the railway station. We met 3 other girls also from Germany who went through the same thing. And we right away decided we stick together, whatever comes. After we cleaned the station, they made us walk to a big empty field with 2 barracks. Before they let us into one of the barracks, they took jewelry from all the women. Now, a lot of the women were married and didn't want to give their wedding bands, so they would shoot them right there. They let us into this barrack. There was nothing there, wooden floors, nothing. They told us to go to sleep. Oh, my sister and the 3 girls, we right away decided we sleep together to keep warm. In the morning, they would bring us old bread and water. And then we were told to come outside. We had to stand outside, and they told us that we're going to the second barrack to work. So we went to the second barrack, which had the luggage of all the 1,000 people that they had arrested. We had to unpack and assort. Now, people had good stuff, even food, but you couldn't take a chance to take anything because they checked you when you left. And if they found anything, they would kill you right away. We did this for a couple of weeks until all the clothes, luggage was sorted. In the meantime, they always had us stand outside, and the selection was they always picked women to be killed. Once they took me to, and they asked for volunteers. So my sister, of course, volunteered, and the three other girls. Somehow we were left alone, and they put 5 other women into the bus. We, of course, knew then that they were all killed. So from the 200, we were only 100 left. After we cleaned all this clothing, they put us on a bus and drove us in the middle of the night to Tallinn, which is the capital of Estonia. In the middle of the night, dark, we ended up in a real old-fashioned prison. We could hear that we are near water because we could hear the water. And they led us into this prison through dark hallways until they came to a little more modern building. And we had to stand in line. Then they picked 10, push you into a room. And so they had all 110 rooms. My sister and I, we always made sure that we are not separated. We were in this room, the lights went on, and we saw we are in a prison cell. 1 toilet, 1 little sink, and against the wall they had like 7 beds. So I was always the youngest, so we told the elderly women they can have the 7 beds, and 3 younger ones will sleep on the floor. At night, they would open the door and check. And in the morning, they would bring us all bread and water. And then we had to come out. It took us again through these dark hallways to a big place outside the prison. We saw a German man. He told us that he is a representative of a German construction company, that we are going to work for them. If 1 runs away, 10 will be shot. We're going to work for them and we're going to get an extra soup. So they marched 100 women through the city of Tallinn to a shipyard. The shipyard was in bad shape. We assumed that the Russians and the Germans had been fighting there. So we had to clean up the shipyard. Every morning they brought us from prison. We had to work, and we did give an extra soup, and evening he would take us back to prison. On the shipyard were also German Marines working. Every morning when they marched in, they would sing, "We can't wait for all the Jews to be killed." We had to listen to it, but there was nothing we could do about it. After a couple of weeks, when we had the shipyard cleaned, they divided us into groups. Every group was headed by a German civilian. Some had to work for divers, some had to clean the roads, all kinds. Our group we had a German, the only German who was civil to us in all these years, and he taught us bricklaying. So first we had to unload the cement and bricks and all that stuff that you need, and he taught us bricklaying. We worked on that for a couple of weeks too. He was the only German that was really, really good to us. After the war, when the state of Israel was declared, we recommended him to be honored, and he was. So we worked on the shipyard and until it was in good shape again. They didn't let us out of prison. We never knew what the next step is. Again, one day, they took us out on a bus and drove us closer to the Russian border and to the first concentration camp. When we arrived there, they were already filled, mostly from Eastern Europe. Men and women always divided. The whole camp around was electric wire. If you touched it, you killed yourself. Some people did. And of course, the heads were always SS men and women. This commander would walk around with a stick all the time. Whoever crossed his way, he would hit. But we were sent out to do heavy work outside the camp, like building a railroad, shoveling snow, cutting down trees in the wood. And we did that for a couple of weeks. Many times when we came back from work, we would have to stand around. They would pick sometimes a man, sometimes a woman, and we had to watch how they beat them to death. This went on for quite a while. There were always selections and people disappeared. Then they decided to build a new concentration camp nearby. So they selected a group. We girls were included because they wanted us to build chimneys in the new barracks. So we came to a new concentration camp. We had to build the chimneys in the barracks, fireplaces for the SS for their barracks, and then they brought other people, again, mostly Eastern European, Czechs or German. Again, we had to work hard. We never had medical care. We never had a toilet. We never had a bed. And we always had to work hard. In the new camp was the same thing. Again, we worked for a hard time, and life became very difficult. But we had no choice. Then went on for a couple of months, and it looked like the war became a little more critical for the Germans. So they decided they take us back to Germany, whoever was left. So they took the group and we went back to Tallinn, where they had ships. But they needed a ship for German soldiers to go back. So they just dropped us off on an empty field near the ship. We stayed on an empty field, no cover, nothing. We hardly got any food on an empty field. They were bombing and people got killed, but we had to live like that. Finally, they had a ship. They loaded us on a ship, of course, on the bottom, the Germans on top. The ship left, and once a day, the German DSS would come down and look. Whoever was sick or whoever had died, they took those bodies and threw them into the ocean. After a couple of days, the ship landed in Germany, and we were unloaded and loaded onto little boats down the river to another concentration camp, which was already fully occupied. The name was Stutthof. When we got there, the first thing they did was shave our heads and gave us rags to wear. The coat they gave us had a big Star of David in the back, which would glow at night. We didn't have to work. We were just standing around all day. At night, they would push us into a barrack. But the barrack was too small for the women, so we had to teach ourselves to sleep standing up. Once in a while at night, they would come with a pail of cold water, throw it over us and tell us that's your shower for today. Still wet, the next morning we had to stand outside again. That went on for a couple of weeks also. They also always took out women. We never knew what for. There were German farmers who came and picked women to work for them. You never saw any of these women again. One day, somebody came from an ammunition factory in Hamburg, Germany, and selected also a group of women to work. Now, my sister and the three girls, we always made sure that we are together. So they took us again by train to Hamburg, Germany. They unloaded us. We had to walk to the other camp again. Germans were standing, nobody said anything. We worked in the factory 12-hour shifts. Many times when we came back in the evening from a 12-hour shift, they wouldn't let us go to sleep. They would make us run around, do all kinds of things. All the SS commander would tell us that their plan was to get rid of all the Jews. They just needed us to work. So we had to listen to that, and they had no choice. Bombing started. It was already the end of 44, and bombing started. We still had to go to work. But when the bombing became heavier, they decided to close this camp and take us to another concentration camp. They put us again on a train, and we went to Bergen. When we arrived on the platform, we saw that they had brought survivors from all over camps lying on the platform. Mostly men were dead. They took us 100 women marching to the city or to small cities there in Germany. Germans looked, nobody said a word. And we saw smoke in the air and we asked, what is that? And the SS woman would say, oh, that's where you went up because we are going to make soap out of you. We finally arrived at the camp of Camp Bergen Belsen. Now, we had been in several camps, each worse than the other, but you had never seen anything like Bergen Belsen. Dead bodies lying around, sick people lying around. There was a typhus, and it was just horrible. Again, they shaved our heads, and all we had to work is pick up dead bodies into piles. It was the end of 44, and it was very, very difficult. Again, we never had medical care, anything, a toilet we didn't have. At the beginning of 45, things became more difficult. The SS men and women, they would walk around, hid. The camp was surrounded by security towers that were occupied by young Hungarian men. They would shoot at us whenever they felt like it. In 1945, on April 15, 1945, we saw a big truck. We didn't know what it was. It turned out the British Army. Now, they didn't expect what they found. They weren't prepared for it. So the first thing they did, gave us their army ration. Now, many people, many stomachs couldn't even take that, and a lot of people died just there. The British realized that they have to take out people that are well enough, and they have to burn down the camp. So the British doctors and Canadian doctors took us all out. The only thing good was that we witnessed how they arrested the SS men and women. They took us out of the camp nearby to big buildings where probably the Germans had lived, and they put us into those big home caserns by nationality. Now, there were many people who decided to go back to the country they came from, but we knew that we will never stay in Germany. So they took us into these big buildings, but we had finally a bed, a toilet, a shower, and the British and the Swedish doctors were very good to us. They finally went from room to room to see who was sick. Now in my room, I was sick and one of my girlfriends. So they took us out into an ambulance, gave us a shower, put hospital clothes, and took us one of the buildings that they had made hospitals. My sister couldn't follow the ambulance, so she didn't know where I was. So she went from building to building until she found me. But I was too sick with typhus, they wouldn't let her in. After 3 weeks, the girls would push me against the window so my sister could see that I'm still alive. Couple of weeks later, they would let her come and see me. And they told the doctors that she's taking me out for a walk. She took me out for a walk and she never brought me back to the hospital. Nearby, they had opened a displaced person camp and she took me there. And people from all over, from all kinds of camps, came to look for friends, for relatives. We knew that we won't find anybody. Among these people that came a young man my sister knew from Berlin. He was always active in youth organizations. He's the first person who told us about Auschwitz. We have never heard of Auschwitz. We had no idea about it. He told us that he was also deported from Berlin with a family and thousands of others. But in Auschwitz, he was separated from his wife and child, and the other people, they were all gassed. And he and a few other young men were taken out near Auschwitz to work in a factory. And now the factory turned out to be IG Farben, and they're the one who produced the gas for gas chambers. After the war, they sued them. So we lived, excuse me, we lived in this concentration, in this displaced person camp, and organizations came, you know, the British treated us very, very nice. But we all planned to get out of Germany, but no country was ready for it, I suppose. We always wondered, what is the whole world doing to save us? Luckily, we didn't realize that the world really didn't care. But we were in this displaced person camp, and it was a while and nothing was happening. My sister got married to this man. He became active, and we decided until we can leave Germany, we moved to a small town to a more normal life. And the Germans gave us a house that was previously owned by a Jewish family that didn't come back. So we moved into this house in Lübeck. Other survivors came to move to the city too. We all became like one family. We celebrated any occasion. Organizations brought food. Other survivors came, and we lived like a little community. The synagogue was standing only, the outside was standing, the inside was destroyed. So we made it our job to fix up the inside. We had services, and we waited for any country to take us. One day an American soldier came and said, we are nearby, but we Americans are leaving and the Russians are taking over. And he thought it would be a better idea to bring the survivors he has to us, to the British zone. You know, Germany was then divided in British, American, French, and Russian. So of course we agreed. And he brought a busload of survivors. They were all put up in German homes. And again, we became like one big family, celebrating any occasion. Among these men, the survivors he brought, was a man from Warsaw, Poland, who used to have a jewelry store. When the Germans invaded Poland on September 1st, 1939, they went to his store, they beat him up, they destroyed his store, they stole his jewelry. He had two sons. So he told his older son, I give you money and you better run away and find yourself a place where you are more safe. So this young man was 18 years old. He ran away he ended up in Siberia. They didn't kill anybody. They were in camps too. But like I said, they didn't kill anybody. They had to work hard and the winters are very difficult there. The Russians didn't tell them the war's over until 1946. Somehow he found out that his father had survived and lived in Germany. So he made his way to Germany. It wasn't easy. You had to jump on trains or hang on the train, but he made his way to the city we lived in. His father, who was a very smart man, had opened a little jewelry store. So we always used to go and visit. So one day we went to visit and we saw this young man. After the liberation, I was 18 and he was 21. We came to the store and I was very innocent and naive. This young man somehow snapped. I didn't realize, but he took me out for dates. He took me to the movies. He never went by myself. I always took somebody along. In 1948, when they declared the state of Israel, they also gave papers for people to move. So of course, my father, he wasn't my father-in-law yet, he and his new wife went to Israel, but people their ages. Of course, the son wanted to go too, but they told him, no, you can go illegal. And his father said, no, I don't want you to go illegal. You went through so much, you wait till you get official papers. So they left for Israel and he moved into the house with us. We continued dating, and on June 12, 1949, we got officially engaged. He knew that I would never separate from my sister, and their plan was to go to the United States. So he said to me in 49, you know, before we go to the United States, let's go to Israel. Let me see my father, and let me see relatives that came to Israel much before it was a state of Israel. So I agreed. In the end of 49, we flew to Israel. I can tell you the feeling you have when you land in the land of Israel. First of all, they come on a plane to welcome you. And you land. And, before you were dead to the Germans. And there you land in a Jewish country. Everything is Jewish. It was a marvelous feeling. We lived with my father-in-law and mother-in-law. My husband met all his relatives that he hadn't seen before. And there wasn't much we could see of the country because it was mostly occupied. And it came to the end that we had to leave and go back to Germany. So my father-in-law said, no, you're here, you're going to the United States. If you don't like it there, you can always come back here. But let me make the wedding. And I said, I'm not getting married without my sister. She's the only one I have. And then we didn't have, we hardly had telephones, but they arranged, and my sister came with her husband, a suitcase full of food and a wedding dress. On February 1st, 1950, we got married in Tel Aviv, Israel. Soon after the wedding, we had to go back to Germany. When we arrived in Germany again, nothing was from the United States yet. So we lived in Germany for a while. And finally, in 1950, we got notice for the United States. But I was pregnant, and we didn't want to come to a new country. We didn't have money. We had to go to the hospital. So we decided we have this baby in Germany. So my son was born on April 27 in Lübeck, Germany. And on June 27, we arrived in the United States, in New York, with a 6-week-old baby. The immigration took care of us very fast because he was screaming. And in June in New York is pretty hot and humid. We came out of office. Our friends who had come before us were all there to welcome us. And they knew that we have a contract with the Jewish community in Stockton, California. So they all said, why do you want to go to Stockton? You don't know anybody. Stay here and we will help. And we agreed. And we moved into an apartment with survivors in the Bronx. A walk up on the 4th floor, no elevator. But we didn't know any better, so we lived with them. Neighbors all were very, very nice. They were looking for an apartment and they finally found one in the same building on the ground floor. Just 1 bedroom and a living room, no kitchen. The wall in the living room had a stove, a refrigerator, and a sink. We were happy. Finally, we had some place of our own. 3 weeks later, my sister came with her husband and 2 children. So we all lived in this little apartment. Many other survivors lived in New York. We all got together and we enjoyed being alive. And everybody had a little family by then. One day, my sister was invited to friends who had come much before. And she came back and she said, oh, they live in Queens in a house with a backyard. And we said, yeah, very nice, but we can afford that yet. But the American soldier who was lawyer by then heard about it and said, that's a very good idea. He arranged for us to get a loan, and we got a house in Fresh Meadows. Neighbors all there were very, very, very nice. Everybody contributed something. Every Jewish holiday we were celebrating with neighbors. But our friends who stayed in New York were all upset because they thought they would never see us, because you had to use the subway and the bus, and then, first the bus, the subway, and then a bus again. But it didn't take long, and they took a chance on that, and eventually they all bought homes around us. So we became a very happy family all around. My sister had a second child, and in 1956, my husband said, I think it's time we have a home of our own. So we bought a home not too far away. And again, neighbors were very nice. Everybody contributed something. And we started a normal life. In 1957, I had another baby, another boy. My husband worked as a watchmaker for a big factory. We picked up the broken watches, took them home, he repaired, and I would have to bring them back. And many times I got lost on the subway, but I learned. So went on for a couple of years. My children grew up. They went to public schools. My older son, he didn't even finish high school. He wanted to go California. So we said, okay. He went to California, took a course, came back and said, I like California. I want to finish school in California. And we said, no, you finish school in New York first. So we went to NYU, graduated, got married much too young, and moved to LA to go to chiropractic school. We had the same problem with our younger son, but also insisted he finish school in New York. In 1957, my sister had died of a rare disease, not 53, 47. And my younger son was old enough, so I drove with him cross country to LA. My older son had already an office, Oh, we had a nice welcome, and I knew my younger son was in good hands with his brother, and I had to fly back to New York. When I got to New York, we had a letter from both our sons that we are a small family. We should be together. We should know our grandchildren, and our grandchildren should know us. We thought about it, and we decided they're right. We gave up our home, we gave up our business, and we came cross-country to LA. We had a happy reunion in my son's office, and my husband said, yeah, but now I have to do something to make money, and I don't want to be a watchmaker. So my son said, don't worry, we took care of that. You can be our office manager, and mom can be the secretary. So my husband said, but I don't speak English. I have to call insurance companies. I have to talk to patients. They said, don't worry. Insurance company, their English is not that great. And private patients, they will learn to understand, and you will learn to understand them. So that's how it started. We worked for them for 16 years. Each of our sons had 2 sons, all involved in sports. We went to any sport that they participated in. And we enjoyed being together with the family. We finally had a place of our own. And we really enjoyed being in California. Our grandsons are all in sports, but our second grandson came up with a grand idea. He wants to be a surfer. And we said, a surfer, what is that? And he showed us. We took him out to the ocean. He went surfing. It got night and he didn't come back. But we got used to it that he's a surfer. Unfortunately, he always went surfing before he went to school in the police days. But one day he went surfing and he had an accident. A wave hit him. He couldn't help it and he was floating in the ocean. First, everybody thought he's joking. Then they realized that he's not. They fished him out. They rushed him to the hospital. We were all called and we were told that he broke his neck and that he will never walk again. Of course, we were all upset. He went to the hospital. We went to college, always with a caregiver. And we learned to live like this, and he learned to live like this. And he decided to organize a group for handicapped people. It's called Life Rolls On. He's very active. His organization has many, many members, many people helping people in wheelchairs or in not being able to walk. They come to the beach and they help them going to the beach, going to the ocean. We all were, as happy as could be that at least we have something. And the best part is that about 6 years ago, he even got married to a lady he met in his apartment house in the elevator. About 6 years ago, they did get married. My older grandson is married and has 2 children and lives in San Diego. And then it's Jesse. And luckily, he did get married 6 years ago. We had a happy wedding. We were all thrilled. But unfortunately, my husband passed away exactly 6 years ago on cancer. I had cancer before he did. After he was diagnosed with cancer, it took not too long and he passed away. A week after he passed away, I had a stroke. I was in the hospital. And when I was released, I came back to my apartment and the boy said, "You can't live there. First of all, it has stairs and you can't be there by yourself." So they put me into assisted living. So I lived in this and it was okay. The assisted living, they took pretty good care. Luckily, my older son bought a house next to his son, Jesse. And luckily, he took me out of the home before this virus started. So I live with my son next door to Jesse. I see his wife gave birth to twins, and I see the twins almost every day. And I guess this is the best for me, and I am happy that we made that decision. Now I speak in museums, but unfortunately, museums are closed. So luckily we have this, and I try my best to talk on this a few times a week. And that's my story, I think, yeah. And I want to thank everybody for listening. Hi, Mike.
I thank you so much for sharing your story with us this afternoon. We do have a couple of questions from members of the audience.
Sure.
So we have somebody who asked you, how were you so brave? She says you were able to tell your story in such an amazing way, and how did it feel at the time, knowing that things were out of your control, and yet you were able to still be so brave?
I was young, had the support from my sister and my friends, and, came to the United States. That's
Thank you very
ended.
much.
More questions?
Yes. Do you remember anything about prisoners eating food right after liberation and getting sick?
I guess I had the disease before I ate. I had typhus then. And, everything was delicacy after.
Do you know how your parents met each other?
No, I have no idea.
And did they have anybody to help raise you when you were children?
No, I don't think so. It was my older brother and sister, actually.
You mentioned that your parents were deaf.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the synagogue that you went to with them when you were growing
Oh, yeah.
up?
Yes, there was a home in Berlin for young people that are deaf, and we used to go to service there on the high holidays. And I was always impressed how the rabbi was speaking and doing sign language at the same time.
Do you still remember sign language?
No, I only know mother and father. That's all I know. The sign language here is completely different.
Thank you very much for
Okay.
sharing that. When you came to the United States, what language would you and your husband speak to each other and to your children? Did you teach
German.
them?
German.
Did you teach your children German?
They are the same.
Early on, when what made you tell the Germans that you were Jewish when they thought you might only be part Jewish?
First of all, 39 when we had to wear the Star of David anyway. And people that knew us, okay, and strangers.
Do you remember the feelings that you had when you were finally liberated?
We were all excited and happy and thankful.
Have you ever been back to Germany or Israel?
Oh, I've been to Israel many times. But I went to Germany once, yes, to Berlin, because I wanted to go to the Jewish cemetery where my brother was buried. And we had the names of our parents engraved in his stone, so at least their name is somewhere. And I went to the apartment house we used to live. My sister refused, I didn't. I went up and I saw that the next door neighbor was still the same. I rang her bell. She almost fainted when she saw me because she knew me since I was born, because at that time you were born at home, not in a hospital. So she really knew me half my life. I told her about her country, that not only to my parents, but to 6 million other people. And got it off my chest. And I went back to Lübeck, waiting to immigrate to the United States.
Thank you for sharing. How did your neighbor react to that when you told her that?
Oh, she always claimed she didn't know anything.
Do you remember when you were during the Holocaust having a feeling that it was never going to end, or do you remember thinking that you would see the end one day?
Oh, there were moments where we thought they would kill us and we will never do it. But luckily, somebody's watching us and we survived.
Thank you very much. We have another question about the neighbor. Before the Holocaust, was she friendly to your family?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Just to conclude, you mentioned you've been sharing your story for many years at both museums and schools and other institutions. Why do you do it? And what is a message that you would like people to take away from learning your story and your family's story?
People should know, the whole world should know about it, because there are many people who deny that it really happened. And I think it's very important for the future that it never happens to anybody again.
Well, thank you so much again for sharing your story with us this afternoon, and thank you to Sally for your help. Thank you so much for everything you do for our community
Thank you.
and for our future. As mentioned, our museum was founded by Holocaust survivors who wanted
I
to
know
make
one of
sure.
them. Yes.
Yes, and I know that you knew Dr. Sherman Zaks,
Yes.
who was one of
Yes.
our founders. He was a veterinarian, and
Oh, yes.
Angelina knew him. Our museum was founded by this group of Holocaust survivors who wanted to make sure that this history would never be forgotten and that their families and all victims could be remembered. And our museum provides the space where we can remember those who perished, honor those who survived, and most importantly, commemorate, educate, and inspire future generations.
Absolutely right. Yes.
Thank you so much, Angelina.
Okay.
And oh, yes. Sorry, internet froze for a minute. Thank you so much again, and thank you to our audience for asking questions and for your attention. And we hope to welcome everyone at the museum in person whenever it's safe to do so. But in the meantime, please follow our website and our social media for our programs. Have a nice, happy, healthy, and safe weekend.